Hello, welcome everybody to the Art Workshop. My name is Christopher Epling. Big thanks to PikeTV and theholler.org for making this show possible. We really appreciate you, the viewer, tuning in today and participating in what we have in store for you. Now, if you're familiar with the show already, you know that we cover a variety of different art techniques, different types of subjects and subject matter that we look at and consider. But one thing that I was considering before this show is that we've not approached a very huge portion of drawing that's important to a lot of students that I've talked to across our region, and it's also a very viable field in terms of profession one day if those interested in going on to do any type of planning or architectural design type work. This is a huge market. There's people out there who have entire careers based on the designing and the shape and the look and the feel of automobiles. If you think about cars in general, there's tons of different varieties of shapes. There's different types of proportions. There's large vehicles, small vehicles. Vehicles in turn really give us a lot of room to work with. We have a lot of different options for vehicle design. So when you think about designing a car and you think about what the look is for that automobile, it's a good starting point, I think, always to look at the general shape of the automobile first. So we're going to be doing the same basic techniques that we've worked with before. So the circle method in using these very loose shapes that we're going to draw, and then we're going to actually, just like professionals would do in the field, we're going to start to mold that and shape that into a design that we want. I'd like to show you beginning a couple tools that we're going to be looking at today. Now this is actually an angle. And angles are used a lot with art and getting perspective in the right shapes. Angles are important. Now when you're thinking about designing an automobile, you may also consider that there's not a lot of right angles, so you're not going to see a lot of sharp angles and points. There's a lot of curves with vehicles. But with this shape and with this tool, we're able to actually design first the basic shape that we're going to be using, and then we start to mold down from there. So I'm also going to be using just a general mechanical pencil today. This is just your typical mechanical pencil. I have an eraser with me. Now this is something that I bring to a lot of my workshops in the schools. This is actually a right-over pencil, so you'll see that there's two ends to this. There's a blue end and a red end. What this is used for is laying out shapes first that we're going to be drawing on top of. So this gives us, for using the circle method or our general shapes in the beginning, this gives us a different color to work with, so we could draw on top of that with the graphite. But I want to show you a basic example of what I mean by molding our shapes. So when you think of a car, if you think of a vehicle, you don't typically think of a vehicle as being, let's say, square or rectangle. This is true to a certain degree, but we can use these shapes in the beginning to help guide us. I see a lot of students, they'll start to draw a vehicle and they get overwhelmed because the shape just gets out of hand. The wheels are not proportioned to one another. Maybe the angle of the car is setting, it looks off to them, so they get discouraged right away. Now here we have a series of straight lines, and they're connected by another series of straight lines. Now you can see this is almost like two rectangles nudged up together. So we start out with just this, our basic shapes, and we're going to start to build on top of that. These angles, what happens is when you use the angle, it helps to guide you, so you know this line that I'm making here is going to be straight and a degree of an angle that I want in comparison to these other lines, and this is important. So when I'm starting out, I'm just going to create a general shape. Now I don't want you to draw it home with me just yet. I want you to just watch, and you can see what I mean by this. So this looks nothing like an automobile. This is in fact just a series of rectangles stacked on top of one another. But what happens is once we have this general shape, we can start to see the flow of what the car would look like come together. So we can imagine that there's a wheel here. Okay, there's perhaps a wheel on this side. And you can see how this starts to fit now a little bit better. And a wheel back here. We won't draw the wheel in the back rear right now because we want to focus just on getting this general shape down first. So this looks like a very boxy car. You may have seen a car like this 40 years ago or something, but in today's culture we don't see a lot of real boxy shaped vehicles. There's some, but with this general shape what we could do is start to mold this into something. So you can imagine that we have the starting point. So here's a wheel here, a wheel here. So this is the front of the car. I'll use the blue to show you. So we start to connect these lines together a little bit more, and we start to get a shape, and the shape starts to form. So car designers out there will actually consider what's really popular in the market, and they'll design the automobiles, the upcoming new line or the new series of a certain particular car or make or model in what's fashionable at the time period, and they'll actually start out by designing and building something from the ground up, just like we're doing here. So you can see now how this starts to take the shape more of an automobile as we start to mold it. Now, a really popular show that a movie from the Disney line that a lot of students are really interested in is the movie in the series Cars from Disney. Those students who are really into drawing automobiles and want to learn how to do this better, a good starting point is actually that movie and those characters from that movie. So for today's exercise, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be drawing one of the characters from the movie Cars. And you can see how these general shapes come together using, if you have a ruler at home, you can use a ruler, by stacking these shapes on top of one another, and almost like clay, you're almost molding this into what you want. So if you want to draw along with me, go ahead and grab your pencil and eraser, and let's get started, okay? So keeping that in mind that we're going to mold this into what we want to try and attempt to draw the character Mater from the Cars series movie. So I brought this box outline of what Mater looks like, and you can see how this artist has used straight lines at first to guide themselves to get the proportions correct. So you can see the large square in the front here. You can see how these squares are stacked on top of one another, going back towards the rear. Now, the design of this character has a very strange shape and hood of the car and the roof of the car. It's actually a tow truck, but you can see the slant that comes down. This gives a little bit more character to Mater, and so we're going to be using these shapes, and we're going to be drawing the character ourselves, so you could get an idea of where we're going towards before we ever start. Okay, so the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to, if you have a ruler, that's great. If you don't, it's okay. Try to eyeball this the best you can. But we're going to start out with this square that makes up the front of the character, okay? So draw along with me, very loose, don't press down very hard at all, but go ahead and sketch out. If you have a ruler, like I said, that's great, use it, but sketch out this large square that's going to be making up the front of the character. So we'll do that first. We want this because this helps to guide us. So we're going to be drawing a square. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm using the angle to help give you examples of how the angles are used. So you can see the square that I've drawn now. Now the next shape we're going to be making is actually the piece that goes back to the rear of the character. So in order to do this, the first thing that I do is I establish where I'm going to stop. Now if you notice from the character here, the length of the body, this is perspective again, so that means that you can only see so much of the rear of the vehicle because of where the perspective of how you're looking at it, right? So you can't see all of this area. In fact, this area, if you were to measure this from the starting point on this side of the hood to the right side, and then you were to look at the total length, this length of the character in this particular drawing is actually shorter than the entire front of the character in this drawing. Now that doesn't make sense in reality, but in perspective it does, because you're standing at an angle. You're looking at this character from an angle. So whenever we start to design or draw out our shape for the side of this character, we need to keep that in mind, okay? So the first thing I do is I establish where I'm going to be stopping. I'm going to go back to about right here, okay? Now remember, I'm pressing down very lightly. You may have a little bit of a time seeing my lines at home, so I'll go ahead and make these a little darker for you so you can see. Now remember, we've talked about this over and over, that whenever you start out drawing, it's a good idea to not press down very hard. And the reason for that, you're going to be doing a lot of erasing. You're going to be erasing a lot of these lines. You're going to be reshaping these lines. Now you can see how this looks like the side view of a large rectangle, and that's exactly what we want right now. I'll keep going back to this to reference. So what we've done so far is we've drawn this square that makes up the front of the character, and then we've drawn this shape which makes up the side of the character. Now there's a split in here. If you notice, there's a line that breaks this shape up in the middle, and it breaks it off in going in each direction. So we're going to actually do that here too as well. So all that means is that you're going to draw a straight line going down the middle of this portion of the rectangle. Then you're going to draw another straight line coming from the rear to the front, going in this direction, okay? Now notice this is a little lower because this is where our wheels will set, all right? Now the next thing we're going to focus on before we start putting any detail into this is the roof of the car. So let's look back at our example again. The roof comes up and then it slants down, okay? So we're going to be doing something similar to that. So we're going to start just inside of our rectangle, and we're going to be drawing this shape which comes up like this, and then it's going to slant down, right? Now this, when you're starting out and you're designing anything that you're looking at and you're considering drawing it, whenever you start to lay these basic shapes out, it's not meant to look exactly like your finished piece. This is just lines to help to guide you. That's why I always ask students to not press down very hard, because you're going to be reshaping all this stuff eventually. It's all going to change as you go. So now we have the basic shapes that we need to start putting in the detail for our character. All right, we have the roof, how it comes up in the slant. We have the square at the front making up the front of the vehicle, and then we have the rectangle to the side that is split into 4 sections for the side of the vehicle. So let's go ahead now with this in mind and what we have to work with, and let's start building this character. The first thing that I want to do is I want to start in the corners, the 2 corners of my front rectangle, and I'm actually going to put a circle in here, okay? This is for the headlights. So you got one here, and you're going to add another one right here. Okay, on each side you're going to put a circle. Now remember I said that we're going to be shaping this, and it's exactly what we're going to do from here on. So we're not going to follow these lines exactly that we've created. We're going to be using them as a guide. Our next line comes down. Notice how it comes inside of the headlight and it comes down like this on that side. This side we don't worry about just yet, okay? But right here in the middle at the bottom of this flat line that we use for our square, the bottom of our square, we're going to draw the bumper, okay? The bumper comes down at an angle and back up on this side, on each side, okay? Almost like a smile, right? Those of you familiar with the characters in the series Cars, Disney's Cars, know that all of the features that you would see, like the bumper, the headlights, and all these things the artist used to show emotion and a range of feelings and things with the characters. So they use the bumper to accentuate a smile or other things like that. So we want to remember that we're drawing an animated car. This isn't a like we're designing a car for the car industry, but we're using the similar tools though that designers would use. So now we have our bumper loosely sketched. Remember, don't press down. We're going to trace over all of this at the end. Now once we have that, we can actually start working on the features making up the front of the car. So in the middle of this large rectangle is where we'll put the smile, okay? So you want to draw a line that comes down, making up the top lip here, and up to a point, okay? And a line coming down. All right, now we're going to draw what looks like it's the giant oval shape at the bottom, like the top of an egg, okay? It's going to come down and back up right here. And once we have these elements, we can add the teeth in. Mater is he's a character that he's a little silly. He's a good old country boy type of character. He's very down to earth, salt of the earth kind of character. So we want to kind of capture his innocence in here the best we can. So let's add some teeth in here. All right, there's one of his front teeth, and then we're going to put another one here. You're sketching just using this guideline that you created for the mouth. And he's got a few teeth up here at the top. Down at the bottom, okay, we have just a series of the lower row of teeth here, and then his tongue right here in the middle, okay? So there we go. Now we're going to move up towards the engine. Over here at the headlight, you're going to draw this line coming down in towards the actual rectangle, okay? Then up. This is the engine portion of the character. So you can follow along with me here. Notice that I'm using my lines. They're not guiding me. They're not telling me exactly where I need to make a certain line, but I'm using this as a guide. All right, now we're going to draw the engine. So we have a straight line just below the top of this rectangle. Then we can draw the portions and bits and pieces of the engine inside of this area here. So as you're building this and you're creating from the ground up, starting out with nothing, you're always keeping in mind that you're shaping this, you're molding it. A lot of professionals who design the shapes of cars, they use programs now on the computer, using a computer to create certain shapes and aerodynamic features of an automobile. So they're moving, of course, like everything, further away from pen and paper. But ideas are captured, certain features of that an artist wants for a design of a vehicle is always captured on paper, then brought into that complicated and sophisticated computer analog system that will actually create a 3D rendering of whatever it is that artist is wanting to capture. So for us though, pen and paper, the old school type of way if you want to say, we're building this from the ground up using these shapes, okay? So inside of the headlights you have just a series of a half a circle here and a circle there. This is a full circle and a small circle at the top. And you can see the engine has been developed inside of this area, making up the front of Mater's face, okay? Now we're going to move further up. Now we're moving up as we go. We're going to start up here at the top where the hood of the car is. And for the hood, you see this shape that we've used here. It comes up and down. Now notice if I were to draw exactly along this line, the shape of the hood the roof of the car would be off-center. So we're only using this, like I said a million times, we're only using these lines as a guideline, okay? So I'm going to recreate another line coming up to the top here, okay? And then I'm going to round this off at the top, slanting down just like our initial line did, okay? And coming up on this side now, we're going to do the same thing. Now notice here's where we round this off going up towards the other side so that it's slanted a little bit, okay? And now we have the lines that can help us to guide to make up the roof, okay? Starting up here, what you're going to do is you're going to put a line coming out this direction and a line coming out this direction. So it looks almost like a V, okay? Once you have the V, follow this line going up and you're going to create the shape of Mater's eyes. His eyes are inside of the front window pane of the car, okay? So, the windshield. I don't know why I called it a window pane, but that's okay. You know where I'm talking about. At the bottom here, we're going to put 2 circles for Mater's eyes. So, the headlights aren't actually the eyes of this character. In the movie or in the series cars, the cars do have animated eyes that are a part of the windshield, right? So, we're going to put 2 circles together inside one another to make up the pupils. The smaller circle that you see is for the eye shine or for the glare of light coming off, okay? Up at the top here, we're going to flush this out a little bit more. All right, make the top of the hood or the roof of the car a little more detailed. Now we can start working on the side. Coming over to the edge where this square is placed, we're going to draw this shape coming up to make up the front wheel. Okay, so we have this shape coming up and down. Then watch what we're doing. We're following our line back, just like this, to the back portion where we're going to do this again. Okay, this is the front and rear tire, right? Now for the front tire, we're going to start out, his wheels are turned inward, so we're going to draw a series of circles. It's not overcomplicated, just a series of circles. So don't overcomplicate this. Literally just a series of circles, one after the other. So there's the front portion of the hubcap, and now we can draw the actual tire here. If those of you who have struggled with making circles, don't get discouraged. You can remember that you're sketching this out first, and then you're going to go back over and trace, okay? So there's our first tire. The second one is actually bent down a little bit at an angle. So come over on this side now, draw a series of those shapes again. Just like this, a series of those circles to capture the front tire here. Like that, okay? And we're going to go back over, like I said, to trace it all out so that all your lines that you want to keep are easily seen. Now I'm following the top of my rectangle back to about midway between these 2 tires now, okay? And what I'm going to do, I'm going to draw this line coming down, making the door. It's curved and it comes down. Okay, so that's the curvature of the door here, right? Then we're going to work again towards the roof. So up at the top again, you're drawing a line to make up the side window, the door, the window on the door. So you're just going to follow your lines, okay, making up this portion. Okay, there's a straight drop off right here to this piece. Now he has rear view windows, so side mirrors, I mean. So you want to be sure and add those on. All this is you draw a series of lines coming out from the doors on each side that come back in and connect, okay? And once you have these series of lines coming down, you can add the rear view mirror on the side right here and one on this side here. Now we're sketching this out pretty loose. We're going to go back over and trace at the end, so that's why it's always good to have with you a pen or a marker. Fine tip marker would work better, so you can do this as well, okay? Now let's focus a little bit more now on the rear portion of this character. What happens is at the top of this back portion of this square, you're going to follow the bumper and you're going to come down to the bumper here. Okay, so you're just following that edge down, creating this bumper. Now the rear tires are a little different. They're at an angle. Some students have a lot of trouble with this. I struggle with this sometimes too. Drawing circular shapes at an angle or a perspective can throw you off sometimes. So this may take a little bit of practice, but there's two sets of tires in the rear, okay? So you can see how we've got that. There's actually two tires back there. Now the rear mechanism for the tow truck is actually a series of ropes, but the ropes are connected by this beam that comes out. This is a prominent portion of this character, the back towing mechanism of the truck, okay? So you're going to draw this coming out. This is our, actually the tow portion of the tow truck, and then you can draw the ropes that are connected. All right, so the ropes kind of flow in. They're usually whenever in the movies, I know that the ropes sort of fly every direction when Mater's going to and from wherever he's going. These ropes are flying all around. So put some curvature in there to show that there's some movement. Okay, and at the end of it, really simple. You're just going to draw your hook for your toe here. Okay. So once you have all these pieces together, you should have the general shape of the character. And once you have the general shape of the character with all these little details added in, tracing over it is the best part because you get to see all this come together, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trace over this. All right, I have a pen. All you need to do is just have a marker or a pen at home. And when you go to trace over your drawing, here's what you want to remember. Only trace the lines that you want to keep. If there's a line that you made a mistake, you didn't mean to put that line in the drawing, here's where you can get rid of it, okay? So trace over only the lines you want to keep, getting rid of the rest. So at the end, the idea is you erase all these pencil lines, okay? So you're erasing all the lines that you're not using, and what's left is just your line work or your ink. And that's really how cartoonists and animators who do certain designs on paper will have something to look almost like they just sat down and magically just came up with this drawing, when in fact, no, they've planned it. They've thought about this. They've, just as we have today, they've designed all this out, sketching and resketching, okay? So we're just going to follow the lines we want to keep. You could do this at home along with me. I'd love to see your work. If you were to follow along, and let's say you've created something and you want to share it with us here on PikeTV, please do that. Send it in to us. You can send it to me directly if you want. My email, it should be, we could probably put that at the bottom of the screen for you. It's eplingillustrations@gmail. So if you were to send that to me, I will share it here on the art workshop. I'd love to see what you've come up with. I have a student recently, Izzy Wise from Clay City Elementary. I visited that school recently. She sent a drawing of the Titanic. It's on my Facebook page. Those of you that want to take a look at her work, it's just look for me on Facebook under Epling Illustrations, and there's a great example of the Titanic that she did. Just an amazing job, and you know, I'm just happy we were able to share that. So we're just tracing over these lines we want to keep again. Notice that I haven't done very much erasing at all. The good part about tracing over these lines is at the end, you don't have to erase much if you trace over the lines you want to keep. Okay? Now we're going to work on the roof of the vehicle. Now what I do sometimes is, and it kind of throws me off, is I'll draw over a certain portion of a drawing or a character a few times to get a look right. And at the end, I'm not really sure which line that I want to go with. I've done that a lot. So be careful about that. But we do have a time constraint here on the show, so I'm trying to finish this as quickly as possible so that you can follow along with me. Just tracing over all these lines, keeping the lines that will make up the final drawing, and not tracing over certain features that will not. It's that simple. It's really an easy process. Once you start doing this a few times, you'll get more and more, become more and more proficient at it, and you'll notice that you're erasing less and less because you understand at the end when I trace over what I've just drawn, you know, I'm not going to need to worry about erasing because I get to pick and choose what lines I want to keep. Okay? So we have just about everything traced over except for the back toe mechanism. And this is where also you can add a little more detail into certain things. Let's say you didn't add features when you were sketching it that you'd like to include, such as the rope. The rope has, like all ropes, have a thread to it, and there's these little lines that go up and down the rope, so we could add that in at this portion for the toe mechanism here at the back. What I mean is these little tiny lines like this. So see, we didn't sketch these in to begin with, but now we can add those in towards the end here. Okay, so we have another portion of the rope that comes up to the toe mechanism. We'll add that in. All these little details can be added, and you can continue to add them far after you've actually finished the sketch out. So you know, you can continue to work with a drawing until you get it exactly where you want it. And that's really the fun part about art, is that when you learn how these things are created and you learn the process behind it, it takes the you know, this mysterious element out of it. It doesn't seem so difficult, you know, after you learn how these processes work. And then once you've worked with a certain process for long, you can duplicate that over and over. So put a little bit of shadow in, and always sign your work. That's important. So, you know, if you're interested in cars and how cars are shaped and formed and all the different shapes that cars come in, let's say you're sitting around, you find yourself sometimes drawing at home. This is something you may want to consider as a profession one day. There's a lot of folks out there doing it, and there's no reason why you couldn't. So I hope you've enjoyed today's workshop. Really appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate your participation and your involvement. That's really why we're here, for you. That's it. So thanks again to PikeTV for making this show possible. Please visit theholler.org if you want to see works from different projects that I'm involved with, The Holler. And also please visit my website at www.christopherepling.com. And thank you so much again for tuning in. Until next time, keep drawing.